This is the Holyrood Sources podcast. Thank you so much for being with us today. Now, MSPs Ross Greer and Gillian Mackay were elected as the new co-leaders of the Scottish Greens in August. The contest was decided in a ballot of 950 Scottish Green members out of the party's 7,500 members, so a turnout rate there of 12.5%. They are, a couple of months into the job, I suppose. Gillian Mackay and Ross Greer join us on the podcast. Hello, both.
Hello.
Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure to see you. And actually, Gillian, I was kind of wrestling with how best to describe your maternity leave in the run-up to having this conversation. I've settled on unconventional. Do you think, is that okay with you? Because you're still on maternity leave officially, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Callan is currently sat on my knee, so if you occasionally see a baby foot or a hand, he is participating in this too. But yeah, I think unconventional is probably fair.
Yeah. How are you settling into this idea? I'm quite intrigued by the idea of co-leadership. I wonder, Ross, how two people can lead. Isn't that confusing?
I think for us, I mean, it's partly about living out our values as a party. We've always believed in kind of distributed leadership. Gillian and I are the main spokespeople of the party. We provide political leadership, political strategy to it. But it's not like other parties where it's a top-down structure anyway. So whether it's one or two of us, we're not dictating what's going on. But it is also really, frankly, quite handy to have someone who can go out, build branches, get folk out campaigning, someone who can focus on media, and we can swap that around between us depending on what's going on in our lives at any given moment. And to be honest, for the two of us, I mean, Gillian and I have been joking about what we would do if we were in charge of this party for the best part of a decade. In fact, just over a decade now. So we're getting to stress test a bunch of theories that we used to just sit in the office and rant about. And now we actually get to find out whether that is going to be a good idea or not.
Sounds like plotting to me, Gillian. Is that what you've been doing for 10 years, plotting?
Some people would say that, I'm sure. But I think the other great thing about co-leadership, obviously with me being on maternity leave, is that we can do that. It gives access to that sort of leadership role that I would never be able to do in a party where there is only a sole leadership. Would certainly not be being able to do that with a 3-month-old coming along with me all the time. So very grateful to Ross for picking up that slack while I'm off. But there is a really important point there about life happens and being able to be 50-50 sometimes or 10-90 sometimes in terms of the share, I think is really, really good as well, to make sure that the party's always got someone there. But also so that we don't run ourselves into the floor, which would be very nice over the next wee while.
Yeah. There's lots to talk about. I want to talk about the issues that you are stress testing. We will get to that for sure. But I do want to start here. We're recording on the morning of Wednesday, the 8th of October. Pro-Palestine protests took place in Edinburgh and Glasgow and elsewhere in the UK yesterday on October the 7th, the second anniversary of the Hamas terrorist attack on Israel, in which 1,200 people were killed and more than 200 people were taken hostage. At the time of speaking, some people remain in captivity. Obviously, these protests took place just a few days after an anti-Semitic terrorist attack in Manchester as well. Ross, you posted pictures of yourself in a march on the evening of Sunday, the 5th of October is when I saw the pictures. So were you protesting over the weekend? Were you marching over the weekend?
That was from last Thursday. So that was a march the day after the Samud flotilla, the global aid flotilla, had been kidnapped by Israel in international waters.
Okay, and that was on the evening after the terrorist attack in Manchester?
Yeah, so that demonstration started off with a moment's silence for the victim of that attack. That was fundamentally an anti-racist demonstration. It was a demonstration in condemnation of what had happened in Manchester and in condemnation of Israel's genocide also on Palestine. The leader of the English Greens, Zach Polanski, our colleague, is a Jewish man from Manchester, and he's really challenged this idea that somehow it was inappropriate to protest for Palestine off the back of that attack, because he pointed out, what's that trying to say about the Jewish community, that protesting against a genocide being committed by another state on the other side of the world is somehow offensive to Jews in the UK? As a Jewish man, he was offended by that suggestion. We should all be capable of condemning terrorist attacks, of condemning murders, and of condemning genocide. Surely that's the only consistent position in defence of basic human rights.
I guess the difficulty comes when the campaign against anti-Semitism calls the pro-Palestine protests, specifically the ones on the 7th of October, yesterday, called them sickening. That's the campaign against anti-Semitism saying that. And is there a sensitivity issue if a campaign group, a spokesperson for the campaign group, says it's sickening that such marches have been permitted on the 2-year anniversary of the worst anti-Jewish massacre since the Holocaust, while Hamas still holds hostages in the dungeons of Gaza?
What happened on October 7th was absolutely horrific. Hamas committed vicious, appalling war crimes. It was also the start of a 2-year genocide, a campaign of horrific war crimes committed by Israel. How can we not condemn?
So hang on, Ross. Hang on. I'm going to jump in there because Hamas is a terrorist organisation, and I'm not sure. While I appreciate the use of the label war crimes, I'm not sure that is a fair assessment to describe a terrorist atrocity, and it certainly offers what you've just done there is offers equivalence with Israel's actions. Is that what you're trying to do? Is make a comparison between what Hamas did and what Israel's defense forces are doing now?
Yeah, Hamas murdered 1,200 people. The state of Israel has now murdered tens of thousands, likely far, far more than 100,000 people. There are so many bodies buried under the rubble. Surely we can all be capable of saying it was horrific and wrong for Hamas to murder young people at a music festival or old people in care homes. It is also wrong that the state of Israel is systematically executing toddlers, Palestinian toddlers. We have testimony after testimony from surgeons who've returned from Gaza who say that all they did all day was operate on small children with single gunshot wounds to the head. Like, how can we not condemn all of this? And all of this is a result of an occupation that started when the State of Israel was established in 1948 in a campaign of ethnic cleansing against the Palestinian population. Like, the context of all of this is an illegal occupation that has been going on for decades. Context doesn't justify war crimes. It doesn't justify terrorism. Both sides need to be condemned for the crimes that they have committed. But the context for all of this is a campaign of ethnic cleansing by the State of Israel against the Palestinian people that has now gone on for decades. That's what international law says. It's quite clear on that.
So I think, I think it should be very possible, I think, to believe lots of different things at once, which doesn't always come out on marches or, when we hear head-to-heads on television on this or whatever. I think you can easily believe that what happened on the 7th of October was an almost uniquely barbaric act of terror by really some of the worst terrorists on earth. I think you can believe that in isolation, and I think you can believe that started this particular phase. I'll come back to Ross's comment about 1948, because I think this obviously goes much further back. I'll come back to that in a second. I think at the same time as believing that, though, and blaming Hamas and only Hamas without equivocation for that, I think you can also believe that Israel's response in the last 2 years has been so hideously over the top that it is almost indescribable in its barbarism as well. Reasons and excuses are different things. We know the reason for it, but it's not an excuse for it. It is so entirely over the top. It's actually set the state of Israel in terms of its international relations. It's set it back, I suspect, decades because of the way that response has been made. You can also believe two other things at the same time as well. You can believe in I don't object to the declaration of Palestinian statehood. I can see why people do. I personally don't. I think it's complex. I don't think we know where the state is. I don't think we know where that particular state's boundaries would be. And to be quite frank, I don't think I'll see a two-state solution in my lifetime. But you can still believe that the declaring statehood by Starmer was, on balance, I think, the right thing to do. You can believe that, but you can also believe that what happened yesterday, where in Glasgow, we're seeing people celebrating martyrs and celebrating the Al-Aqsa flood, the Hamas name for the terrorist attacks, is a sickening thing to witness in our country. And I think you can surmise, I certainly think if I was minded, I'm not a demonstrator, I don't really go on marches for any particular cause. If I was minded to do that, I suspect yesterday I might have stayed away because I don't think I would have wanted to have been anywhere near that, whether it was a minority or not. So I think you can believe all these things at the same time. I suppose my overarching view about this, though, is that we are talking about a peace process now, which, to be honest, I have absolutely no optimism over whatsoever, because this doesn't go back to 2023. It doesn't go back to either of the intifadas. It doesn't go back to 1967. It doesn't go back to 1949. It doesn't go back to 1917. This goes back 3,000 years. In one shape or another, there has been religious dispute about this small piece of land for 3,000 years. And frankly, I think it's overly optimistic to think it's going to stop anytime soon. It can get better. It always ebbs and flows. We're in a particularly heightened period of death and destruction right now. And I think it will get better. I'm not optimistic about a solution. But I suppose I think words are really important here at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think actions are important. And I do think that we all, particularly those in the public eye, need to be extraordinarily careful about what we do, what we say, when we do it, and when we say it.
Mm. Gillian, I suppose just to kind of edge towards a conclusion on this particular topic, one of the issues, I think, is this sort of level of discomfort that there has been within the pro-Palestine movement with itself, almost, that it doesn't necessarily call out anti-Semitism on these marches. I have personally interviewed several protesters, and all claim never to have seen anti-Semitism on display on the marches they've been on. Now, that may well be true, as difficult as it might be to believe, because they cannot have avoided the pictures afterwards, is my thing, where there are anti-Semitic placards, where there is recordings of anti-Semitic chanting. And so there is a willingness to associate with anti-Semitic actions on these marches. Is that something that needs to be addressed by those who are taking to the streets?
Anti-Semitism and any form of intolerance has to be challenged wherever it occurs, whether it's happening on these marches, whether it's happening in general civil society. We've seen what happened last week with the attack in Manchester. So we do really need to challenge these things when they happen. And in today's society, with social media and everything like that, it's not an excuse to say that we haven't seen it, because it's very clearly on display in various places. So we should be calling it out where it happens and challenging it, even when it is in our own circles.
Mm. And you would say, with that in mind, I suppose, both of you, that there is no place for anti-Semitism on a pro-Palestinian march. Is that a fair statement to attribute to you both?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And there we have co-leadership in action, potentially. Ross, let's go on. You are 31 years old, I believe. You are the youngest leader of a party at Holyrood since devolution in 1999. You were also the youngest MSP ever to be elected, age 21, back in 2016. What wisdom do you bring to a party leadership role?
Yeah, so 31 now, which means that I'm not a young green anymore. That was at 31st birthday back in June. Got chucked out of the young green slack. It was congratulations, happy birthday. You'll be off now.
Cheerio.
Yeah. So you're reminding me there, Cal, when you kind of summarise it all, that I was the future once. Is how I'm kind of summarising that at the moment. I mean, I've been involved in politics for more than half my life now. I joined the Greens when I was 15. There were more students at my high school than there were members of the Scottish Green Party at that time. So I've been there through that period where we've built our party up from being, let's be honest, a well-meaning fringe outfit of pretty eccentric people to now being a quite significant force in Scottish politics. We're still well-meaning, and I would say we're still probably a bit eccentric, but we are certainly now a significant force in Scottish politics. I've gone from the point where we were able to shout a lot about the stuff we believe in, to now being in a position where we can deliver it. We delivered things like free bus travel for young people, scrapping ScotRail fares, rent controls. We've just passed that bit of legislation through the Parliament. So seeing that growth, but there's also a generational experience aspect of this. I was in the middle of high school when the global economic crash and the recession happened in 2008 and 9. So I've seen my generation, my friends, move through that period in their life where they went from school to university in a really difficult economic context, where huge numbers of my friends still live at home or trapped in private rented accommodation, where they've graduated with excellent degrees or with really practical course qualifications from college, but just aren't able to get jobs relevant to those kind of fields. So bringing that kind of generational experience, I think, is really important to our politics. Particularly now, there are people who will be able to vote at the next election who were born the year that I got involved in politics. So there's a whole generation behind me whose experience I can't even claim to have. But if we don't even have folk in their 30s in positions of political leadership, then that's a huge number of people who are being shut out from the political process, who can't share that kind of generational experience, which in areas like housing is very different to the generations that came before us.
Gillian, I suppose an extension of this thought then is how the Scottish Green Party today sets itself out. Because is it fair to say that the ambition here is to, as Ross says, to influence government beyond 2026 and the election in 2026 and what that looks like? So, for example, have you guys sat down and talked about what your red lines for a kind of any coalition partnership might look like? What are they?
Unbelievably, we haven't had that chance yet, given there's a 3-month-old on my knee. But that will be a conversation that will be being had at some point. I think when I joined the Greens, I was just out of university and things, and we were as a party talking to that group of young people, those students, those young people just coming out of high school and things like that. And I think Ross and I's job now is to make the party grow with that generation that we were looking at, our generation, those people who are now trying to get out of that private rented accommodation, or who have just got their first house, who have got young children, and are moving into a different phase of their lives and need different things from us. And I think that's one of the great things of having Ross and I in co-leadership. I don't know if I would have been the youngest had it not been for Greer. But I think together we can certainly appeal to that group of people in their sort of late 20s, 30s, early 40s, where things are difficult. We've had a number of once in a generation economic events multiple times throughout our early and our early adulthood.
So what's the offer? What's the offer to them? I mean, the other day, Zach Polansky, who's just taken over as leader of the Green Party in England and Wales, suggested abolishing landlords, for example. Is that the sort of stuff that you think appeals to the younger generation, as it were?
So the tagline for that motion at the English Greens conference was abolish landlords. I think 5 or 6 policies in it. Half of them actually already exist in Scotland. So it was about reducing the conditions that result in so many private landlords in the sector. So it was about abolishing right to buy, which we've done in Scotland, bringing in rent controls, which the Greens have just done. We've just passed that bit of legislation. And that's a huge issue for so many young people. You've got a generation before us, or a couple of generations before us, in which you have a lot of people with a lot of wealth who've invested that in property and are then extracting that wealth from the next generation. So you've got folk our age who are paying so much in rent they can't afford to save for their own deposit. The prospect of them getting on the property ladder themselves is so remote. But yeah, the abolish landlords strapline, that it does grab attention. It grabs attention in quite an effective way, and it means everybody's been talking about the fact that the Green Party of England and Wales are setting themselves against these kind of exploitative landlords in the private rental sector. We've done that very successfully in Scotland, not through party conference motions, but because we were in government and were able to deliver a bill that has just been passed by Parliament that will introduce rent controls, that will introduce eviction protections, rights for tenants, like being able to decorate, to keep a pet, that kind of thing. Yeah. So, and part of that's the direction Zach's taken the English party in, and that we want to take the party in Scotland in, is about being a bit more honest about the fact that there are antagonists, there are villains to these stories. For us to be the protagonist of the story, there are antagonists out there, and green politics historically tries to be very nice and very consensual. I think we're going to be just that bit more combative, that bit more confrontational, because that's what a lot of people are looking for right now, is a party that will really fight for them. They want somebody to be fighting for them, because they look at everybody else in the political landscape and they just don't feel like they're coming out swinging on behalf of people like them who are, for example, stuck in private rented accommodation with a landlord who's pretty dodgy. That's a pretty common experience for folk our age.
That's interesting. More combative. Gillian, does that mean you're going to sit in a room with John Swinney towards the end of May next year and say, abolish landlords or we're walking out?
As I said, we haven't discussed our red lines yet.
You can do it now. Do it now if you like. We're happy to chair the meeting.
We're happy to chair. I can imagine what the party conference motion would be like if we did that. But no, that's a conversation we'll have to have in the run up to the election next year. And I think we're right to be focusing on how we get some of those policies across. I think Zach's doing that very well with the abolish landlords stuff down south, and I think there's plenty of things that we could be putting forward to make people, and build on what we've already done to make people's lives better and cheaper and easier over the next Holyrood term.
Geoff, can I bring you in on this idea, this kind of change in strategy that Ross has just highlighted, which is to be more combative in sort of the approach that the Greens might take? Does that match with things that you've actually been saying on this podcast before? This idea that politicians need to be of conviction, stand up for what they believe in, and kind of take the fight to, out in public?
Yeah, I like to see it in politics. I like to see, as long as it's done the right way. I mean, I don't know if you, sorry, can I just say, by the way, congratulations. I've just joined. So congratulations on you guys for being pointed leaders. And I do apologise for being late to the podcast. I was dealing with something else. So I think being combative helps, as long as it's done in a way that aligns with a clear vision that you have. And I suppose my question to Ross is, and I don't know if you've covered this yet, so this might be completely done already. But what are you doing with this Murdo Fraser stuff? I mean, that's not combative. That's just silly. The guy's having a... Sorry, have we done that yet?
No. I was going to put some context on it, though. So, Murdo Fraser, the Conservative MSP, who has now been reported to the police after calling for no more Buddhists as Rangers manager. He made the comment after Russell Martin was sacked on Sunday after 17 games in charge. Murdo Fraser is a Rangers fan. He took to social media. He said, here's the full thing: no more vegans, Buddhists, or Green Party members, please, Rangers. That's the context.
I mean, Ross, what we're doing here, that's a joke. It's a joke.
Yeah, so to be clear, it certainly wasn't me or wasn't us that reported him to the police for a joke. And the bit about the Greens, that is funny, right? So Russell Martin is a Green. Murdo has made jokes before about us being lentil munching watermelons and all that kind of stuff. That stuff's funny, that's fine. But the point about Buddhists, replace Buddhist with Jew, Hindu or Sikh, and nobody would be laughing. So why is it funny about one religion, but like nobody here would have replaced Buddhist with Jew and thought that was funny, because it's not funny, is it? So it's about saying, yeah, fine, you can make a crap joke, make a joke at the expense of your political opponents, make a joke at the expense of my party, that's fine. Murdo has made funny jokes about the Greens before, but Buddhist, that's not funny. And if you'd said it about Jews or Muslims or Sikhs or Hindus, nobody would be laughing. So why is this faith? This faith that that faith seems a little bit kooky and interesting. That was kind of the implication there, was like, that's a silly religion. So we'll take the piss out of that one.
To be honest, I disagree. I'm not sure the tweet was that funny, and I think Murdo needs to improve his sense of humour. That's not my point I'm making. The point is he was intending it as a joke. Whether, we, you, me, anyone else find it funny is subjective. My concern is that now the police have been called into this when there's a hell of a lot of other things the police should be doing, frankly. And I just find the whole thing so annoying. So when you're being combative in politics, I saw your tweet back to him, having a right good go at him, fair enough. But when the police are getting involved and spending their limited, scarce resources on stuff like this, that's when I think you lose the public at large.
Totally, but to be clear, I'm annoyed at the media coverage of this, because the media coverage about Murdo being reported to the police is Murdo was reported to the police for the tweet, and then my reaction to his tweet, I didn't report him to the police. I think that is a waste of everyone's time. He tweeted, I was asked to respond. Loads of journalists were saying, what's your response? So I just put my response on Twitter rather than reply to everybody's emails individually. I certainly didn't phone the police about a tweet. And I got to be honest,
wasn't suggesting you did, actually, Ross, to be fair. No, it wasn't.
But I'm pissed off at the coverage, because all the coverage about this, all the written coverage about this is Murdo reported to police and then my reaction, and the implication is it was me. Categorically not. He made an unfunny joke. I pointed out the bit of it that I thought was not funny, because everybody was asking for my response as co-leader of the party that was also featured in the joke.
Is this where we get to, though, with hate crimes legislation in this country? Is this the natural kind of conclusion of that sort of legislation, that something that it feels like there's agreement here doesn't deserve police time is now getting police time? And that's what happens when you start trying to police people's thoughts and speech and tweets.
a lot of this debate we've had over the last couple of years since the Hate Crime Act was passed misses out on the fact that the vast majority of what's in the Hate Crime Act was already in the law. It was a consolidation act. It added a couple of things, and it didn't. What it added was not relevant to this particular tweet. Anybody saying that this tweet was breaking the law would have been arguing that before the Hate Crime Act was passed, and quite a lot of it goes back right to the 80s, so that there's not been some new wave of legal repression of hate speech in the UK, but there was a recognition that our hate crime laws were fragmented a bit all over the place. They were applied pretty inconsistently on the basis of like different characteristics, for example, and again, it goes back to my frustration at media coverage. The media coverage of the Hate Crime Act being passed was as if this was some sweeping new bit of draconian legislation, when the reality was about 80%, I think, of what was in that act was already the law. It was just all being brought into one place because it was fragmented all over the place. And the other 20% was just making sure it was consistent. So, for example, around things like age, making sure that age was in there as a protected characteristic like the other ones. So, no, I don't think that there has been some kind of massive legal crackdown on free speech. The problem we've got is, regardless of whether the Hate Crime Act was on the statute books or not, if anyone reports something to the police, then the police are obliged to say, okay, we'll look into that. This has happened to me before. I know for a fact it was folk involved in the Conservative Party who have reported me to the police before with various allegations around hate speech for comments I've made at pro-Palestine rallies that the police took 2 seconds to dismiss. But what the police have to say in the first instance was a report has been received and inquiries are ongoing. So that then allows for media headlines saying X is under police investigation. So this week it's Murdo. It's been me in the past. That is an unfortunate reality of politics. It's nothing to do with the Hate Crime Act. That happened before the Hate Crime Act.
It's a load of nonsense, the lot of it. This is what really bugs me about politics just now, and I reckon it bugs most of the people out there. This stuff, and I get it, the media like a story and all the rest of it, but we've got to find a better route to our discourse, because I just think folk are disengaged, scunnered, and I tell you, I'm one of them with this stuff.
I think it's marginally more important than seagulls, but really only just.
Yeah, that was a load of nonsense as well.